Hello, one and all, and welcome to a Windfall Reading Series for April 2022. My name is Wendy, and I work at the Eugene Public Library, and I'm happy to be here to invite you in to listen to a fabulous evening of readings. A few things before we launch into them, and I introduce you to Henry Alley of the Lane Literary Guild. First, I have some thank yous. Lane Literary Guild, first and foremost. Just a fantastic group that encourages authors and hosts readings and is very much involved in the literary world and just makes programs available for authors and people who like to listen to authors do their work. So thank you so much to the Lane Literary Guild for all you do. I also wanted to give some thanks to a couple of groups that support the Eugene Public Library. First, we have Friends of the Eugene Public Library, and also parallel, not in any particular order, we have the Eugene Public Library Foundation. Both groups are just fantastic. They fundraise, they make programs such as this and many other programs possible. We have summer reading coming up, free books for people to read and to engage with their community members. So many programs. We just had a really successful book sale thanks to the Friends of the Eugene Public Library, and we're just extremely grateful for all that they do to help the library run smoothly and do all of these kinds of programs. So thank you so much. The other quick thing I have to say is that at the end of the readings, there is a chance for you to ask questions or make comments and for us to field them to the authors. So the sky's the limit. Ask anything you like, and we will either read them or Henry will read them or I will read them for you. There are two different ways that you can get them on the docket. One is to just type your comments straight down below. You can write just into YouTube and we will read them from there. You are also welcome to email me. Let me send you an email, and I know that that's also coming up below. So there are two different ways you can get my email. So you don't have to memorize this unless you want to. So this is my email address, and you are more than welcome to email me your questions or your comments. You can use your name. You can use a pen name. You can use your cat's name. We were talking about cats. So by all means, any name you want to use, and I will read your questions or comments as well. It's a great way to engage with everybody. So that is that. Let me hide this for a moment. All right, so to introduce the authors and to get everything started smoothly and wonderfully, I'd like to introduce Henry Alley from the Lane Literary Guild. Hello.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you very much for that introduction. And again, the Lane Literary Guild wants to thank the Eugene Public Library for being such a tremendous support over the years. The Guild has been around since 1984. And it has been a remarkable force, I think, in the community. I was actually around when the founding happened through Ingrid Wendt and Bill Sweet, the people that had the idea for the Guild. And actually, our launching point was a reading by William Stafford. And it's great to think of him tonight as one of our initial readers. Over the years, we have supported workshops, we have supported critique groups, and we feel that our outreach has been quite wide, including not only the Lane County area, but also the Portland area and further around. So we think that we have really supported the fiction writers, the poets, the memorists, a wide variety of artists. Through the years, we arrived at a series which we now call the Windfall Series. It was in the early 90s that happened, and we paired together two distinguished writers throughout the months of September to June. And we have continued with that all the way through. That's over a 20-year actually a 30-year period now that I think about it. And we have such an impressive list of people that have served us over time. So we're very happy to be here tonight, and this will be the second to the last reading of our season, which has been very rich. So our two readers tonight are Sara Burant, poet, and James Magruder, the novelist, and we feel that they do marvelous work. And our first reader is James Magruder. I've had the privilege of reading his full novel, Vamp Until Ready. And before I give the details from his literary life, I just wanted to mention the wide variety that this book covers, not only in terms of wide variety of cast of characters, but wide variety of landscapes, including Uganda and including upstate New York. And it's as I say, it's a very rich tapestry that we come up with. He has a capacity in this novel to quickly sketch characters that really are remarkably dynamic. I just want to read a few sentences from his sketch. Hannah Habaker wasn't a Beach Boys kind of California girl. Gavin would eventually dub her the little match girl for the multiple drifty layers of skirts she wore and for her distracted self-presentation. What Hannah was, though, was adamantly alive. Once she began talking about Dave, her recollections of the office culture he created were laser-like. She described his ties, his cufflinks, his gestures, his catchphrases, a couple of which Gavin chimed in with, his brand of Jim, his dismissive side-eyeing when irked, his triumphs, peeves, and disappointments. And we have these kinds of sketches going on with a great deal of energy as they go through the novel. As far as James's literary background is concerned, his history, he has published 4 books of fiction: Sugarless, 2009. It was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award. The linked story collection, Let Me See It, 2014. Love Slaves of Helen Hadley, Hall, 2016, and the recent one, Vamp Until Ready, 2021. Recent work for the stage includes co-authorship of the book Head Over Heels, the Broadway musical mashup of Philip Sidney's Arcadia, 1580, and the song catalog of the Go-Go's. His translations and adaptations of comic works by Dickens, Marivaux, Biche, Lesage, Dancourt, Moliere, Gozzi, and Hofmannsthal have been produced on and off Broadway across the country and in Japan and Germany. He is a 5-time fellow of MacDowell and has made Baltimore his home in 30 years. So, without further ado, from Baltimore, our reader, James Magruder.
Thank you, Henry. I'm very pleased to be part of the Windfall series, and thank you, Wendy. So this is Vamp Until Ready, and I'll be reading from 2 sections. You could think of it as a book of 5 linked novellas, linked by place, which is an upstate theater, summer stock theater in New York, out in Ithaca, New York, where I went to college and where I have a lot of autobiographical memories. So without further ado, I'll read from part 1, and it says, and it's about Carrie Dunkler. It's 1980, and there's an epigraph. Aunt Polly, it ain't fair. Somebody's got to be glad to see Huck, from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. On my first audition for a professional theater, I chose not to sing something upbeat and youthful, like Corner of the Sky from Pippin, or Something's Comin' from West Side Story. Prepped by my best friend Robin Tasher, I sang The Ballad of Immoral Earnings from the 3-penny opera in German. I kid you not, auf Deutsch. In einer Zeit, die nun vergangen ist, lebten wir schon zusammen, sie und ich, und etc. It's a great song for Mac the Knife, not for a 20-year-old with a big nose, freckles, and pitch problems. As I sang my wide-armed gusto, a must for musicals, momentarily stilled the flies in the windows of Lincoln Hall, the Cornell Theater Arts Building. My auditors were just as frozen. Then I read for the role of Randy Hastings in Gemini, the season opener for the Hangar Summer Theater. Randy is a college sophomore from Connecticut. I knew that. So why, and at the last possible second, had my brain decided to tell my mouth to talk like an English woman whose hearing aid had just dropped into her lap. When that loud badness reached my own ears, I downshifted and began shading my Randy Hastings with Milwaukee colorations courtesy of Laverne and Shirley. I'll stop there. But the thing is, folks, I had been on stage before. I finished to the sound of rustling papers at the far side of the room. No one asked for an adjustment or for me to read for other parts or to sing scales. No one mentioned a dance call. I was going to work at Harold's Army Navy, your everyday fashion people, on the Ithaca Commons for the rest of my natural life. Thank you for coming in today, Carrie, said Gavin Steig, the new artistic director of the hangar. I nodded, face on fire, gave the script pages to the stage manager, then opened the door. The wannabes stretched to the other end of the gloomy corridor. The oldest ones were mumbling lines on wooden folding chairs. The most limber dancers all seemed to be smoothing their bangs with the balls of their feet. I turned and called out to Gavin, "Give Dave my best." Gavin smiled. Just past 40, he knew things. Since my foster brother Dave and I talked all the time, he knew my greeting was unnecessary. But he also knew that after stinking up the room with my audition, I had to broadcast this tiny personal advantage in front of my competition. I will, Carrie, and thanks again. Singing Brecht and Weil to get a part as a baseball player in Damn Yankees was overcompensation on my part. I'm a townie. Dave had been a townie too until he got an off-the-charts IQ score in the 6th grade. A childless sociology professor named Lee Bailey snapped him up, put him into private school, and then got him a completely free ride to Cornell at Telluride House, the special college within the college for brainiacs. I stayed on with my foster parents, Hugh and Mary Gabelson, and their real daughter, Judy. I left their house after getting my diploma from Ithaca High and before they had a chance to tell me to leave. Dave embarked on a double major in economics and the history of science. I took a few community college courses, including German, to impress Robin, and did musicals at the Strand Theater for fun. I'm not stupid by any stretch, but I must have decided somewhere along the line that we couldn't both be geniuses. Dave claims that he envies me my solo apartment on East State Street, but he doesn't pretend that selling Belgian knapsacks and the world's scratchiest socks is anything but a dead end. He graduates with honors in 2 weeks. If I keep my nose clean, I could be assistant floor manager by Thanksgiving. That both Dave and I turned out queer is less interesting to people when they discover we're not actual blood brothers. On the other hand, they seem to expect incest in foster kids. David left the Gabelsons before puberty, and though we'd spent time hanging out together, the subject of girls versus boys never came up. I don't know who was more surprised than that I saw him walk into the Common Ground, Ithaca's only gay bar, with a crowd of jittery preppies and a fake ID. He's a year older than I am and American handsome. He claims he's envious of my mustache too, but I know better. I haven't told Dave that I have no interest in being an actual actor, although I do like to hang out with entertainer types. When I was in Annie Get Your Gun last November, I had an affair with a milkman from Trumansburg, also in the chorus, whose wife was pregnant. We'd make deliveries along the east side of Cayuga Lake right after dawn, then screw in his truck at the entrance to Taganic Park. All these months later, the dairy section at the high-low can still get me going. That sounds so towny, doesn't it? And so now I'll shift to the very opening of part 2, which is about 2 women. Let me find it. And it's 2 years later. And again, these characters repeat from section to section. Here we go. Part 2. Christy Schroyer and Issa Vass, 1982. And here's the epigraph. It's from Juna Barnes's Nightwood. It's a gruesome thing that man learns only by what he has between the one leg and the other. Oh, that short dangle. We corrupt mortality by its industry. Christy Schroyer was 12 hours into a Friday double at Simeon's when her mother dropped dead. Her eldest, Janice, phoned her at work, a cardinal no-no. Taking the receiver from the wall extension next to 10 gallons of simmering stock, Christy expected the worst. Maybe Wayne had tried to kidnap the girls again or make off with whatever in his twisted mind he thought was still precious to her. Last time it was a Christmas sweater. The sequins, she figured. He liked shiny things. Mom, I'm so sorry. What's wrong? Graham fell down on the rug and I can't wake her up. Christy wasn't expecting this worst. TV room or the living room? What kind of question was that? Her mother was dead. She watched a new prep cook toss celery tops into the stock pot, then start on a crate of carrots. The living room. Good. They'd still be able to watch television without that visual. A horrible thought, and she knew it. How's her color? Christy asked. She had once wanted to be a nurse. All white. Is there blood? I didn't see any. Okay, I want you to hang up now. Close the door to the living room and send your sisters over to the Montleys. I'll be home in 2 shakes. Christy didn't dither, but neither did she fly. First, she called 911. With a corner of her cocktail apron, she wiped steam and perspiration from the receiver, dropped a handful of carrot dice into the pot to be helpful, and then, rather than involve her supervisor in the drama, found a coworker to cover her tables for the rest of her shift. She walked the 6 blocks home in her uniform, and when Janice unlocked and unlatched the door, she remembered to tell her that she had been very, very brave. Her mother, born Louise Camille Petka in 1911, and now no more, lay on her side in her pajamas. A book and a pen were on the sofa, but there were no dents in the cushions. So Christy figured her mother must have just set down her crosswords before stroking out. The fall had dragged her wig forward over her face and had caused her left heel to twist out of its old blue sneaker, unlaced because of the diabetes. Oddly, her right arm was stretched straight as a stick under the sofa, as if it were reaching for something important. Holding her breath in case of smells, Christy crouched by the body and followed the plaid flannel sleeve for corroborating evidence. A $1 bag of sandwich creams, a roll of waxy chocolate mini donuts, a pint of rye. Louise had kept up the bad habits of her era and upbringing, but there was nothing she was pointing to now, except this surprised way out. Christy tugged the pajama top collar into place and stood. It was going to be some night on the phoner. Her brother, her snooty sister in Albany, the aunts, uncles, and cousins. Tomorrow would be Louise's poker buddies, St. Stan, State Farm, Social Security, and a funeral parlor. She'd have to concentrate on getting the order right. If Carrie wasn't baking, he could keep an eye on the girls, take them somewhere, give her the room to feel something, to, what was the word? Process the event. The approaching wail of a siren down Seneca Street struck Christy as a male waste of noise. Her mother was dead and gone. For lack of anything more decisive to do, she clicked the pen on the couch shut and put it in her pocket. How was she going to keep Wayne away from the wake, the funeral, the interment? Fresh occasions for his maudlin dad act. One thing was sure. The rings couldn't go into the ground with her. There was no money for anything. And now, with this catastrophe, there'd be even less. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, James. That was a rich experience that we had. And as I said before, we crossed quite a spectrum of experience in the novel. And certainly the reading demonstrated that. And also just the light and bright comic tone. So I just wanted to mention before we introduce Sara, our second reader, to the River Road Reading Series, which is also sponsored by the Lane Literary Guild. And it will be live in your living room via Zoom, Saturday, April 30th, the last Saturday of this month, 4:30 to 6. And we have 3 readers, Marie Gauthier, poet, and we have Maggie Chula, another poet, and we have our own Lane Literary Guild member of former times, Rhonda Simich. She now teaches in Washington, D.C., and she'll be reading, I imagine, from her prose. So those are be three very interesting people to consider. And also, I wanted to mention as well our Lane Writers Network, which allows you to see what's happening on in terms of the literary scene here in Lane County. And if you, as a member, for example, of the Guild, have not yet renewed for this year, 22-23, there is an opportunity to do so. There is either the address to send the check to, or there is actually a PayPal button that you can use to pay in order to renew. We do depend on your renewals to keep going as a guild. All right, I now want to introduce Sara Burant, whose poetry is very rich, and has struck me in reading her poetry the long sentence that she creates in her poems, which in a way create a kind of metamorphosis that's very striking. For example, in her poem, Upon Hearing the Glaciers Being Declared Officially Dead, she creates that sense of change that happens, like expecting the crevice edge to crack, breakage I still carry in my pack, though years have fallen through us, and we've little occasion to speak. The glacier is dead news. I zip into the cool hidden pocket and keep walking, beforming and flowing under the weight of zero. So you get this sense of changing images in a kind of metamorphosis that's enhanced by the lack of punctuation in the poem. Another one that's very similar is Feral Pigeons Over the Empty Ball Fields, circa fall 2020. And we again get that sense of change, of metamorphosizing in these lines. Instead of rain, they opened windows. I heard wheels, steam vents, and winnowing, clapping, and a crowd I heard running. I heard horses, and I could say there were horses, and I could say there were the manes of horses making and remaking. So we get that shift, from pigeons, horses, and the sense of the sound that's going through the poem. And in the last sample that I would bring up would be a kind of flow of memory that goes back to the time where the speaker was a girl, and there were various songs that brought up important feelings when the young person was young, such as it found in the album Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, or John Travolta's Saturday Night Fever. All of that is blended together in the poem. So I want to read Sara's background here. Her poems have appeared both online and in print in journals such as Spillway, Ruminate, Pedestal, and Spry. Her reviews have been published in various journals. A former gardener, she now enjoys looking at other people's gardens on the long walks she takes around Eugene. This winter and spring, she keeps seeing Western Bluebirds and hopes one day to have a full-length poetry collection of her own. She'll be reading lyric poetry with some narrative and regional flavors tossed into the mix. So I would like to introduce Sara Burant.
Thanks, Hank. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thanks, Wendy and the Eugene Public Library. Thank you, James. I enjoyed your reading very much. Felt like I was right in the midst of those characters' lives. Thank you to the Friends of the Library and the Library Foundation. And thanks to the audience for being here today, and the future audience for tuning into YouTube. I'm going to begin with a poem that I did not write. And I'm inspired to read it because I have, in the last week or so, been caught in various cloudbursts of hail and rain. And so I thought immediately of Laura Jensen's poem, The Cloud Parade, from her 1977 collection, Bad Boats. Here's the poem, The Cloud Parade. In deference to the cloud parade, the horse has shed its winter red, stamped its last horseshoe out of the shed, and left no forwarding address. The heavens turn furniture, attics and beds, men with mustaches, heels over heads. They cover the sun to a gloomy shade, in deference to the cloud parade. Scarves, echoes, pavilions, the meat grain and bacon, the star stun and roast, the bone down the well, the moon down the wane, the smoke from the fireplace, beautifully made, in deference to the cloud parade. That's Laura Jensen. Now, the first poem I'm going to read is one Hank referred to in his introduction, the one that references Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. The poem is called Oh, Oh, Oh. Oh, oh, oh. It was rumored that girls disappeared in the woods where my girlfriends and I smoked merits. Me morphing into flutter, meandering skyward with the rings we blew, cocking our mouths into up-pouring spouts, snapping our jaws. Oh, oh, oh. Presto, it was magic, sort of. How the rings appeared precise and sinuous, undulating like John Travolta's hips, then elongating. Oh, oh, oh. Those days, that summer I wanted to gather and weave into a smoky silver cloth, a flowy gauzy dress my mom would never let me wear, but lounging all nicotine dizzy in the grass I could dream of it. Oh, oh, oh. My head spinning somewhat slower than a record, my head filled with rumors. Stevie Nicks, her gossamer look, her voice of moth wings and ash, blowing loneliness like a heartbeat through me. How it felt when the boys showed up, always with a frisbee, spinning on someone's finger, and we moved from the sheltering trees into a field of staggering light. Those boys, their blitheness and grit, those boys who knew they mattered more than songs, gossip, laughter, those boys for whom we'd say anything, adopt any look to get them to look at us. Oh, 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 our lovely languid smoke rings, little mouths, little selves leaving us, saying nothing and everything as they kissed the world goodbye. I think the poems I chose tonight are thinking about and grappling with time, the passage of time, and a kind of grief that comes with an awareness of the passage of time, and also grief over climate change and climate chaos. This next poem is a longer poem in four short parts. In the second part references Ovid's story of Baucis and Philemon. And they were an elderly couple who welcomed the gods when everyone else in the village turned the gods away. And as a result, they are turned into trees for eternity. And the village becomes a stagnant marsh. So the poem is called Lindens in four parts. Part 1. Tilia Americana, the basswood or linden, tolerates a wide range of adverse conditions, including pollution, particularly particulates that thicken the air on bad air days and make breathing rough. But the linden is tough. It can take it, year after year, putting out throngs of summer blooms, clusters of 5-petaled, creamy yellow-green affairs, whose numerous stamens make them look fuzzy, a shaggy nonchalance, reminiscent of boys I knew in high school who spun frisbees on their index fingers, often to music, Foreigner or Styx blasted from a car's cassette player, the doors left open. How suddenly the boys would cut and run, piling in, heading somewhere I had no access to, leaving behind the tarry scent of cigarettes, cloying aftershave mixed with sweat, and a smoky longing that burns still inside me. 2. According to Ovid, one of them became a lime tree, a linden, I like to think it was Baucis, Philemon the oak, twining flexibly if woodenly around each other, sharing intimacies through fungi joined to their roots, their bark fused so that you couldn't make out where one began and the other ended. Gods who served the gods, in the Phrygian hills overlooking a marsh where once a thriving village stood. The honeybees would make quite a racket each spring in Baucis's flowers the way they do in the neighborhood linden. The fragrance some describe as cloying works like grit in the shell of my mind. To be so changed, suddenly, of a sudden, out of what you thought you were. In part 3, in some woods I used to walk in, there used to be 2 trees, unlike, yet having grown inseparable, until one of them fell after a freak snowstorm dumped many inches of wet snow it took us days to dig out from. Then, how very lonely the one tree stood. People returned to me in dreams. The boy who sang sweetly of trees, the girl with loose stockings, the man I saw once on Unter den Linden in Berlin. 4. On East 26th Avenue, linden glow warms an already warm December afternoon. The light companionable, fleshy, flavored with departure. Lately, everything wears a look of nostalgia. These honeyed days, will they last into winter? What does it mean to hybridize readily? Come sail away, the band sang. The old linden of nature's Switzerland, described in 1357 as Magnum, still stands in the town square. Fossilized leaves of its ancestors found in Grinnell Land and on Svalbard, where presently no trees grow. This next poem is another poem that Hank referenced, the one about the glacier, and it's the result of, and buried sort of in the news of 2020 was the fact that scientists have declared that the Clark Glacier on the South Sister, our own dear South Sister in the Cascade Range, the Clark Glacier is officially now dead. The poem's called Upon Hearing the Glacier's Been Declared Officially Dead. That hollering wind catches again in my throat, the way it once caught at our tent all night. It hasn't died down by morning, blowing open my mind's shutters to that interminable, static snowfield ascent, with neither ropes nor poles, cold's iron taste, sunlight banging like a gate in my sternum. I grew old, expecting the crevasse edge to crack. Breakage I still carry in my pack, though years have fallen through us, and we've little occasion to speak. The glacier is dead, news I zip into a cool hidden pocket and keep walking, deforming and flowing under the weight of zero, sucking the world we knew through its infinite mouth. This next poem is what I think of as my everything, including the kitchen sink, climate change grief poem. In it, I refer to Svante Arrhenius, the scientist, the late 19th, early 20th century scientist who first postulated a greenhouse effect from the burning of fossil fuels. And I also reference Charles Keeling, a mid-20th century scientist who tracked the accumulating carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The poem is called A Noticeable Degree. Time accelerates while I shrink. Morning once more, a giant's house I enter, unsure what I've come looking for. In a photo I find online, Svante Arrhenius has the bearing of a furnace. Using slide rule, pen, ink, and paper made from boreal trees, he performed the complex, tedious calculations demonstrating the greenhouse effect. The slight percentage of carbonic acid in the atmosphere may, by the advance of industry, be changed to a noticeable degree, he wrote. Which could be a boon, he reasoned, imagining orange trees in his beloved Sweden. Dear Svante, it's 2022. Last year, the human world emitted more than 36 billion metric tons of CO2. In last night's dream house, I hid behind a small door, but outsized legs and feet gave me away. My grief is replete with depletions. It's humongous and comes from the sea, a soft-bodied thing whose shell, like the center, cannot hold. But sometimes, whist, aware, light stitches the pieces together. I remember an afternoon, a green heron whose beak an orange stillness made, whose eye fixed, who lured my boat of disgruntlement and plastic, drifting in B-flat minor. Charles Keeling might have been a concert pianist. Instead, he traced a hidden theme, tracked its variations, rising atmospheric CO2. Now his spectacular curve luminesces off the screen, blue zigzags inside red undulations reaching up, a glissando's accumulating vibrations. Prior to bleaching, stressed out coral phosphoresces, the knobs, lobes, and branches glowing pink, orange, purple, blue as Mardi Gras beads stranded in a vast, emptying city. Strings and strings in dumpsters on roads, our necks once heavy with them. I remember walking the drunkenness off. I remember coming to a bridge, coming to think, could I? Arrhenius built a bridge between branches of science his peers had rather kept discreet. His first marriage over, he threw himself into work, checking and rechecking the calculations. Having calculated the losses, another person might have thrown herself over the railing. Face luminous in the brief hush of hesitation, the dark of falling. Grief proceeds by mouthfuls to eat the simplest, most common things. It pounds the beaches where her body was never found. More than my lifetime ago, Keeling began to take the measure of things at Big Sur, at Mauna Loa, the air's composition changing as rapidly in its way as a leap one person takes, changing everything and nothing at all. Coastal air, supple and magnetic, tinged with the possible and the unknown. Salt, 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 the excitement and succor of work, meticulous, obsessive work, much of which never comes to light, yet trembles beside us. Voices, silences, nocturnes made of doorways, pages, strains and cracks, and strings upon strings of goodbye. The pandemic has certainly given me lots of time to face and process my own personal grief over climate and climate chaos, and I think about it a lot, and I grieve a lot, and my poems offer me a lens through which to focus that grief. So thanks for listening. The next poem's called, I have 2 poems left, and I may read a Lucille Clifton poem too. So I have, this next poem is called To My Son Overwhelmed. My whole life I've tried to keep up, but sorrow's legs can't run any faster. I'm putting the whip away and throwing my notes to self into the blue recycling bin. The hazel's limbs make a graceful cage for air, space, a ruby-crowned kinglet stitches into a map for breathing. The aura stands ready to burn when there's need. Deer ate all but one rosebud that opened the day you were born. Maybe worlds are held together like that. Maybe versions of ourselves petals on a stem with thorns. The midwife pricked the call, releasing tropical waters. We don't swim into breathing. We're pushed, sometimes pulled. I'm learning to expand the back of my rib cage when I breathe. The YouTube yoga teacher says this will make space for a white rose to bloom in my pelvic cradle. Big fragrance released from sacrum to crown. Weird, huh? She insists everything in the body is connected. Along with you, I carried recurrent sorrow, knit, it seems now, into the stars and tides of your being, too. Compass, sextant, ball of string, prayer, we chart, sometimes blindly, a way toward being embodied. When a fir tree beckoned, 3-year-old you climbed to its crown. Your brother came running to tell, and I saw you falling, except you didn't. You were hugging the trunk, the bark's resilience imprinted on your plum soft skin. And that really did happen. My 3-year-old son did climb to the top of a fir tree, and his father had to go up and rescue him. It was pretty terrifying, but we all got through it. I'd like to end with 2 poems. The first is by Lucille Clifton, and it's a blessing. I feel like we all could use a blessing these days, or many blessings. It's called Blessing the Boats. May the tide that is entering even now, the lip of our understanding, carry you out beyond the face of fear. May you kiss the wind, then turn from it, certain that it will love your back. May you open your eyes to water, water forever waving forever. And may you, in your innocence, sail through this to that. May we all, in our innocence, sail through this to that. Thanks, Lucille. My last poem is my one pandemic poem, and I feel like it ends the reading on a note of praise. Here it is. Feral Pigeons Over the Empty Ball Fields, Fall 2020. Can I say they were of water and light gathered up and let go, gathered and let go? Can I say they had water's patina, a river's, eddies in the sky? Instead of rain, they opened windows. I heard wheels, steam vents and winnowing, clapping and a crowd. I heard running. I heard horses. Can I say they were horses? Can I say they were the manes of horses, unmaking and remaking themselves? Restless variations on a theme, allegro ma non troppo, an unfinished, unfinishable movement, a face rearranging itself as light and shadow, shadow and light, a note left by someone who never comes back. The same house that can't be the same house. Can I say they entered me as if I were that? Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for being here. I'm very grateful.
Thanks very much. Again, a variety of experience that we were privileged to enjoy with you. Thank you for your selection. Really great. All right, well, we're ready for some questions. And I don't see anything yet coming up from the YouTube. Do you, Wendy, see anything coming up, or should we just launch in?
I see, I don't have anything in my email yet, and that's not uncommon. Although certainly feel like you can still send me an email. I do have one comment from J.W. James, and it just says, "We need poetry about climate change grief. Thank you, Sara Burant."
Great. Okay. Well, let me start with James. He read first. In novel, it's interesting that you have sections that are from a first-person point of view, and then you have third-person point of view. Can you talk to us a little bit about what was going on with that kind of shift?
Yeah, I think I was, prior to this book, I've written very, very autobiographical first-person queer narratives. And I guess I was trying to, I don't know, expand the brand, exploit try to find out if I had any range. And so I wanted to write functioning straight women, because they had not really appeared in my fiction. And I was afraid to write an entire novel because I didn't want to discover after 80,000 words that it was terrible. So I kept myself to like sort of 15,000 word things. So at the very least, I lose 30,000 words. But anyway, and again, I did not feel because now the buzzword is stay within your own lane. I did not feel I had the headspace to write a first person woman, write a woman in the first person. So I put Christy and Issa and another one, the one who goes to Africa, in the third person. And historically, like first person is my sweet spot. Third person is really tough. So it was enough to challenge myself and to, I guess, expand my palette of characters.
Yeah, it's great. Good
way of saying it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I just was wondering what you find difficult about the third person, if you can even put that into words, or what you did until you did it.
That's a great question, Sarah. I think it's because my background is initially from theater, and a play is like a competing landscape of first person people talk. But with third person, you have to do what in the theater is like, you don't have to you have to describe what somebody looks like. Whereas in the theater, that actor takes care of it. Or, and the sentences I hate in writing in third person are, she crossed the room and opened the door. Like, I don't have to do that in a play. That's for that. So it was just but I have a question for you, Sarah. You look so much younger than I do, but I feel if the girls are smoking Merits and you're getting if you're getting your information as I did as a teenager about the world from album covers,
yes,
then I think you and I form, we're from the same sort of Midwestern ethos and vintage.
I think we are. Yes.
I wanted to thank you. I wanted to read a comment from Victor Congleton. What a lovely way to answer my frequent wondering of what my old neighbor Sarah is up to. You've been up to some terrific poetry. Thank you. Sarah, this is connected to what James had said. I have a sense that you've been writing poetry for a long time. And I know that you and I go way back in our acquaintanceship. I was wondering, have you noticed certain changes in your poetry over such a long period of time of writing poems?
Well, I guess because I didn't really start writing poetry until I was almost a middle-aged person, or virtually a middle-aged person. It's funny, I don't really feel like I've been doing it that long compared to people who started when they were teenagers or in their 20s. But I think my poems have changed. I think I'm more willing to bring in lots of different kinds of material into one poem, instead of having it be very focused and almost haiku like, in its focus.
Yes.
I'm willing to just expand the boundaries and invite things in. And I think what you talked about when you talked about my work before I read is just letting things unspool.
Yes.
I think I'm willing to do that.
For sure. Yeah, great. James, you and I both are familiar with upstate New York. I was there from 1967 to 1972. And I was wondering, as a landscape, do you think it's particularly distinct from other provincial areas? Were there certain aspects of that landscape, other than the fact that you did live there for so long, but were there certain aspects of that which attracted you to write such an extensive work on that area? Particularly from the standpoint of theater people, is there something about Ithaca, New York? That's what I'm saying.
Well, there is that hangar theater where the thing is set, and it sort of started up and gathered steam as I was graduating from college. Now, I'm from Chicagoland mostly, so where the winters are brutal, but the winters in Ithaca are also brutal. But what people may not recall or have not experienced is like the summers are incredibly intensely muggy. So even though there's it has lakes, it has mountains, but I don't know if Wendy or Sarah have been to Ithaca, but it's really one of those special college towns, like the blue county in the middle of a red. So like Ithaca and Athens, GA, and Burlington, and it's just a beautiful, special, sprouty place that hangar theater is actually giving start to a lot of people who still work in the theater today. We're still on Broadway and off Broadway. So it's just a great place to spend a summer.
Yeah, there's an idyllic nature to it. I was there for all those years, and I think I went to New York City once. It was though I was living in a completely different sphere. Yeah.
It's a socialist leaning hamlet.
Yeah.
So it was, and people like go there to school, and then you go to school and you see all these people that never left, and you think when you're fresh, what is wrong with them? And then you realize there's no reason to leave. It's such a beautiful, supportive community.
Yeah, great.
Is Ithaca? I think I visited there once. Does it have a bunch of waterfalls, like a park with a whole bunch of waterfalls?
Yes, there's yeah. It's at the bottom of Cayuga Lake, and there's several falls, and they always say the T-shirt is Ithaca is gorgeous, because there's all these gorges.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So yes, that was Ithaca.
Yeah.
And also home of the Moosewood restaurant, right?
Absolutely. There's the Moosewood appears in Vamp Until Ready.
Oh,
in a way, the book is a Valentine to both my youth as a theater performer before I became a writer and a thinker about the theater. It just takes me back to, my 20s when everything was possible.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question coming up now from J.W. James. Would you talk about the expansive vision to include the environment and grief may be changing form of your poems?
Oh boy. I think I write poems out of my lived experience, but and my lived experience in the last few years has definitely been one in which grief is an almost daily experience. Grief of over things in my personal life, but more broadly speaking, grief over all the losses that we're in the midst of. And so it's just about, for me, it's just become like opening the doors and seeing what flows in. And I think in terms of writing about the environment, I guess I just have also become more open to putting in scientific facts in my poems, or adding, or even quoting. In fact, I think at least one of the poems I read tonight, there were direct quotes from, other sources, more scientific sorts of sources.
Yeah. we've had a number of our readers say that with the arrival of the pandemic, they just couldn't write the way they had before. And that's certainly been true for me as well. And it moves right into what you said. I mean, grief has been uppermost in some of the work that I've been doing. And I see that happening in your work as well. Yeah, that's great. James, you've got Uganda going on in your novel. I love that. I mean, we're in upstate New York, and then let's go to Uganda. So tell us a little bit how about Uganda fits into this wide sweep of this novel.
Well, in 2013, my husband, who was a nurse research coordinator to prevent clinical trials, to prevent HIV transmission from mothers to babies in clinical trials, he'd been working for Hopkins in Uganda, like for 3-week stints throughout the year for any number of years. And I decided at the age of 52 that I could just go to Uganda for a year because they love being over there. And then, and because it turned out to be such a very, very stressful year for me that I could not have anticipated, we left when the dictator / president, who's still in power, sponsored a Kill the Gays bill. So Hopkins airlifted us out, but already my sense of self was deteriorating as it had never been before. And so it was an answer to a prayer I was too afraid to ask. But rather than feel that I flunked Africa completely, I wanted to write at least a section of this novel about a woman who takes on Africa and succeeds. And I think that's what in a way, I've just imagined myself into this character as somebody who was able to be there and stay there and accept what was there for her. So in a way, it's just so that I didn't feel that I flunked the continent.
It's a surprise in the novel that happens, that the success happens. And the novel is consistently surprising, I think, throughout. So it fits right in. Great. Sara, you read from Lucille Clifton. Do you want to mention some of the influences in your poetry?
Oh boy, I think almost everything I've ever read, really. I don't think it would be hard to boil it down to a few influences. I mean, the two other authors I chose to read tonight, they've certainly been big influences on my work. Lucille Clifton and Laura Jensen, but in odd ways, not super obvious. Another big influence has been that's such a hard question. Yeah, I would just basically have to say almost everything I've ever read. I mean, this winter I was reading Marianne Moore, who oftentimes brought in, quotations from the encyclopedia or an article from the New York Times, or, she just compiled all this like information and then she made poems from that. And I was really inspired by that too.
That's great. Okay, I think we have time for one last question for each of you. James, I can't resist the question. How do the Go-Go's into your literary? I mean, I love the Go-Go's, but I haven't been talking that much about their influence on my writing, but they may be. But I mean, I love the song Vacation. I could play it over and over and over again. Do you want to talk about that? If you don't, another question.
No. I was brought on after the project stalled, and it's the only time in my life I've written verse is that I took Sir Philip Sidney's Renaissance novel, The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia, and created a blank verse book for a musical that used the song catalog of the Go-Go's. And it ran on Broadway for like 6 months, and it's being done all over the country. You could say it flopped on Broadway. The New York Times did not take it to its bosom. But and so there was about a year and a half where all I was doing was counting to 10. Da-da, da-da, Yeah, that was So that's the Go-Go's. The Go-Go's were a priori, and I just
And
had
they were combined with Arcadia.
yeah.
Very.
You could watch. There's a bootleg video of the Broadway production on YouTube.
Okay.
Just watch 10 minutes of it and see how it works.
Okay, I definitely will, because I have to put my hand on my heart and say I have not been able to get through the Arcadia of Sir Philip Sidney.
Oh my God, no!
I'm thrilled by the sentences and their length and their periodic quality, but then I'm either asleep or giving up and going and probably listening to the Go-Go.
No, it makes the Fairy Queen seem like Dr. Seuss.
Oh yeah, absolutely easy peasy compared to Arcadia. Yeah, great. Sara, I just wanted to note, how much your work responds to the natural world. Do you think you were prompted in your earlier writing by that, and more prompted now by the issues around the natural world, or do you see that it's kind of consistent all the way through?
I think it's probably a continuum. And like when I think about, I don't want to be somebody who just writes downer poems, about climate catastrophe and glaciers melting and coral reefs bleaching and dying, and I sort of have this little project now of trying writing poems of praise, which again I consider the final poem I read tonight more.
Yeah. I know Theodore Rettke ultimately said he was a poet of praise, and I like that. I love that part. Well, thank you both. I wanted to read Cecilia Hagan, who's been a longtime member of our guild, and a longtime officer. She said, "I don't have any questions, but I'm full of appreciation for Bert James's and Sara's work. Thank you for this inspiring reading." I can only repeat that. So thank you both so much. And to our audience out there, if you would like to pursue the published writings of our authors, please consider Tsunami Books, our literary bookstore. We are very proud that we have a literary bookstore, a community bookstore here in Eugene. That they're a vanishing breed, and sadly they're disappearing, but we have ours, and please consider buying from them. So again, do you have any final words, Wendy, for us? Or
I don't. Just appreciation for both of your readings. This was a fantastic evening, and thank you both so very much for sharing your words with us. This has been a great night.
And please be tuning in to us for our final reading on the 17th of May, and we will have Ingrid Wendt, who is one of the founders of the Lane Literary Guild, and also Timothy Witzel, who will be actually, I think, launched the whole Windfall series. So there'll be two of our pioneers reading. So thanks again.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.